Hello everyone and welcome to eLearnChat, where you always learn something new. I'm Harold Muliadi, filling in for Rick Zanotti, and this is our wonderful co-host from England, Lesley Price. She is with LearnAppeal, learnappeal.com, a wonderful charity that does great things helping people all across the world. How are you doing, Lesley?
I'm good, thank you. It's been, mixed weather in the UK. Sometimes been very hot. We've had a lot of flooding, so it's interesting. Interesting.
All right, we've got a great guest talking about play, creativity, and all that kind of good stuff. You'll find out after our intro. Here we go.
This show is sponsored by Relate Corporation at www.relate.com, your training and video partner.
And we're back. And joining us in the central position of power, it's Kevin Thorn with NuggetHead Studioz. He's the chief NuggetHead.
Hey everybody, how are you?
Great. So Kevin.
So it's good to have you. It's good to have you with us, Kevin.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. Rick's been a good friend of mine for a long time, and I was really thrilled that he invited me back. So this is great.
So you're doing all kinds of creative things with your company, NuggetHead Studioz. You do design, you do e-learning creation, and one thing that we were talking about last time you were on, talking about Step Away with Carl Kopp and Deborah Thomas. We'll link that show below if you haven't seen that. But anyways, you were talking about instructional comics, and we just barely touched on that last time.
Yeah. So it's been I'm kind of a comic geek, cartoon. I'm an artist, so I've been drawing cartoons since I could hold a pencil, and even in my later high school years and trying to go into college, I actually applied for Disney, and I got thoroughly rejected because my portfolio wasn't quite where it was. So instead of going back, and finishing my portfolio, I got all disappointed and depressed about it. I'm not going to do this. So it was several years later. I kept drawing, for my own pleasure, but then I just got into storytelling, educational storytelling, and kind of drawing my cartoons. I said, there's got to be something here. And then it led me to reading some books with Will Eisner, and then I discovered Scott McCloud's book in the mid '90s, and then I realized, wow, there's a path way before me that's already sort of blazed this trail on instructional comics or using comic medium as a way to educate, inform, and instruct. So that just kind of sparked a little bit more of an interest, but I really didn't know how to pursue it at that point until I got into corporate training. And then I was able to start sliding in a little bit of my own creative sort of visual design in storytelling and comics and cartoons. And it started in that entity or that organization. It was well received. And then fast forward another decade, and I broke out on my own, where I had more control outside of a corporate setting.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'm just going to pursue this more, and I'll, the e-learning, I still do, traditional e-learning design and development, but now I have more control of influencing or suggesting that let's try this medium, and let's give it a shot and see what it's like. And I was fortunate to get a couple of clients that were really interested in the idea, so we would go ahead and build a couple of those projects, and then it just starts rolling like that. So now it's something that it's kind of like the percentage thing. So when I first started, about 10% of my work was in the comic stuff, and now it's about 60-40, I guess. So it's continuing to climb a little bit more, and I don't know. I guess my big dream is to do this comics 100% of the time, I'm not sure we'll ever get there because I still love playing with Lego, so I got to leave some percentage for playing with Lego too.
Yeah.
But it's all about storytelling, play, learning through play, and just being a little bit more creative and innovative in the way you instruct, educate, and inform. So that's my story. That's how I end up where I'm at now. And the big project that we're working on right now is I had some researchers out of the University of Utah and the University of San Francisco contact me about, and actually they had seen a project I did with the CDC 5 years ago, and they said, hey, they really enjoyed that work, and they wanted to know if I was available to do similar work for a project they were on. And it turns out the project is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, a worldwide effort to reduce infant mortality rates in places like low literacy and low income neighborhoods like northern India and Kenya and places around the world. Fascinating. And I was like, well, yeah, let's see what we can do with this. And we just launched the second episode. The first episode was kind of the pilot, and hugely well reception. And it was, again, using this medium, there's a courageous effort on the client and the stakeholders because it's a new medium that they've never used before. So they're investing a lot of time and money into a medium that they don't know what the back end is going to be like. And to have that type of courageous, and I love working with those kind of stakeholders because they're willing to take a risk.
So,
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Harold.
This project, who's going to be using the learning that you create? Is it people with the CDC or people that are helping in these communities around the world, or is it actually the like people in villages and that sort of thing?
Yeah. So great question. So the project, the CDC project, that was an information campaign to inform. It was how to live. Let me get this. My tongue's getting ahead of me here. Patients who are positive with HIV and how to live a productive life being positive with HIV. And the CDC sponsored it, and it was more of an information campaign. And it was open to the general public. Anybody could go and find it on their website and watch the comic.
Is that the? I saw the thing on your website. I saw something called PWP.
That's it. Yeah,
that's
Partners
it.
with Positive.
Partners with Positive.
Yeah, so you're positive with HIV. You don't have AIDS yet. You have the positive virus of HIV, and you can still live a healthy, productive life. Yeah, that's it. That's the comic that we did, and those are the characters. And I'm not sure if that's still. I haven't looked out on CDC's website lately. I don't know if it's still out there or not. But that was several years ago. Through the University of Texas was the sort of the stakeholder, and CDC was the sponsor. And the folks in the University of San Francisco, researchers there's a nonprofit called Pronto International that works specifically with northern India. That's sort of the nonprofit hub, if you will. And then the researchers, the nurse practitioners and the nursing side of it, the healthcare side, is out of the University of Utah. And they're partnered with another nonprofit in India called Care India. So the two of them have come together through this foundation funding through the Gates Foundation. Anyway, they saw the PWP project.
Yes.
And they called me and said, hey, we really love that project. We have similar ideas. Would you be available to do that medium in our project? So that's how the connection gets over to this one. So then to answer your other question, the audience, so the way the purpose of this or the outcome of this project is, and if you're familiar with nursing school and healthcare clinic rotations for nursing students, they go through simulations, and then that's how they get trained with live simulations with patients who are actors who are patients and actors who are nursing students, and then there's a supervisor or a mentor overseeing the simulation, and then grading you on what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, those sorts of things. Well, the way the program is set up, the nurses in training or nurse supervisors that are in clinics down in different villages, they would come to a main training hub and get trained on these new practices. There's all sorts of factors involved in reducing infant mortality rates, but they would go through this simulation, and then they would take that new knowledge and they would go back to their clinics and transfer that knowledge to other nurses in the smaller villages. The training gap was that transfer of knowledge was not transferring. It wasn't getting down effectively as much as they had wanted in terms of the metrics. So they were saying, is there some way we can get that information so it's more accessible, it's easier to digest, and it fits sort of that performance support after the fact that they can go back. And then they had come up with a comic idea, and they contacted me, and that's how we ended up starting. So the audience is then all these nursing that are going through this simulation training. They still go through the simulation training, but they also take this e-learning course, if you will, this interactive comic. And then it's set up like a superhero kind of story. You got a superhero nurse, and you got a villain nurse, and good against evil kind of thing. And then we just relate those characters back to those nurses in their culture, in their language, everything. So
that's
it's been an exciting project.
That's really interesting because aside from just the idea that comics being more visual, they're going to be a little more visceral, especially for people in less educated areas and that sort of thing. But I'm just thinking that I think comics do have a lot of power in other countries, especially like third world countries and stuff like that. Because actually, my parents' families came from the Philippines and Indonesia, and my grandparents, when my grandparents were growing up, they didn't read a whole lot of books or actually reading text and stuff like that. They had a lot of comics. They actually grew up with comics, and
Really?
these countries they had both comics from the Philippines and Indonesia, but they also had things like Tintin and stuff like that around. My parents grew up with that too, and I think comics do speak to people in a lot of countries in a way that I think there's a unique connection there that we really can take advantage of.
Right. So if you, I'm sorry, Lesley, go ahead.
Yeah. So is all the training that they access, is that still all done? Even the e-learning, is that done still in the central center rather than in the villages?
we call, instead of modules or courses, we're calling them episodes. So it kind of used the language of comics. So we have episode 1 and episode 2 currently. Episode 1 is live. Episode 2 is in pilot. And then we just heard recently that we were awarded another funding through the foundation. So we're going to take episode 1 and we're going to translate it to Hindi. We're going to take episode 1 and we're going to convert it to a print comic. Right now it's just digital. And then we're going to develop episodes 3 and 4. So that's the next, that's going to carry us into next year to do all that.
No, the reason I ask is because the charity I work for, Learn Appeal, one of the things that we're doing is providing e-learning offline. Because in these rural communities, they don't have any access to the internet. And what we've developed is something called the Learn Appeal Capsule. So we can actually take e-learning offline in a very small device, the Learn Appeal Capsule, and we're taking it to these rural villages, and people can access it from any mobile device that they've got, and the capsule will cope with 200 concurrent learners. And we've just
That's very interesting. Yeah, so we're running into Well, we proposed that same thing. It is all they can't access it offline, but they didn't have. There was no funding for a system like LearnAppeal at the moment. So I'm really interested in that, and I might want to chat with you offline about that.
We can talk about it afterwards, because the system we've got, as far as we know, all the research that we've done, we're the only organization worldwide that is offering this.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, because you're exactly right. So the lowest common denominator in these types of communities is low literacy one, and that's where the comics come in, because you can read pictures better than you can text. And then connectivity is also a major concern. So we have it available via some type of an internet connection, but we also have it available that you can. It's offline. The current challenge now is the offline version has to be preloaded on these devices firsthand, and then they use and they're all scaled to fit tablet devices. They'll fit on desktop and they'll fit on phones or smartphones, but largely this audience doesn't have smartphones. It's more
you would actually be surprised. You would actually be surprised. You would be surprised, because in these places they actually don't have any landline infrastructure. So the only way they can actually communicate is with a mobile phone.
Right. So there's mobile phones, SMS and flip phones and things like that, but the larger iPhone, Android type devices are not as prevalent as they are here in the West.
But what the capsule that we've got will even work on the first generation smartphones, and it'll even work. We've tested it out on the old Blackberries. Remember the old Blackberries?
Yeah, boy. Wow, we're really dating ourselves now. Definitely. I want to hear more about that, because I think these folks would be interested in this as well.
Yeah, because we're at the stage now where we've got proof positive. We've trialed it for a year, and because it's not just leading edge, it's bleeding edge technology, we had to prove that it worked. We've tried it for a year, and the capsule hasn't broken down once. It hasn't even needed any technical support in a year.
That's great news. That is really great news.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
They call it and it will cope with video. It will cope with all video and everything. It's device responsive. And in the local communities in Kenya where they've got it, they call it the magical miracle box, because they've never experienced. Yeah. And they think it's been sent by God, because they've been praying for learning. They've been praying for learning for so long. They actually believe it's either God or Allah has sent this to them, because they've just been praying for it. And I say, when Rick was
that's a great story.
It's a pity Rick's not here, because he actually met the chap Eric Kamuri from Kenya. The guys who run the Learning Technologies Conference actually paid for Eric to fly over from Kenya to attend it back in February. They funded his whole trip.
That's great news.
Yeah. And we're now going to be applying for funding to grow the charity. So I'd be very interested in talking to you to find out if we can maybe put your comic stuff on the capsules, because that way it would really widen the audience.
Yeah. So there are some talks with this client, not this particular funding, because we're still in India, but they want to, based on we know episode 1 is a success, and we have the pilot is already proving success on episode 2, and so it's not unheard of that episodes 3 and 4 are going to match the same type of response. So there's already talk about planning for 2021 to take this same material, the same topic, and convert it to the audience in Kenya. The same thing, the same mission to reduce infant mortality rates, but instead of India and Kenya, because there's different factors involved. In India, it's predominantly low literacy and malnutrition, that causes infant mortality. In Kenya, it's dehydration is the main reason, a pregnant mother. So the same training, but the different factors that involve in that. So we're in talks. It's going to be a while, but Kenya's on our radar.
Yeah, but we're going to be expanding. We've also just been approached by a diabetes charity, and they do training at the moment in various African countries, because not just training of the medical staff, but also training of the individuals, the people who've actually got diabetes, because the medical staff don't understand a lot of the new stuff that's coming out that they want to send out to them, and
that's where comics can really help communicate that knowledge gap. That's where I think that's where the evidence and the research can back up, where the comic medium can solve those really difficult conversations, or help facilitate difficult conversations.
Yeah. Well, I put out a tweet, 3 days ago, and said we were going to be doing this charity stuff with diabetes, and it was retweeted from all over. Rick retweeted it, but so did Luis Malbas, so did Brent Schlenker, loads of people in the UK, and I've now got 20 volunteers who've said they'll be instructional designers. And
nice.
I'm going to get people with diabetes will be and medical staff will be the subject matter experts, so that we can actually create content both for the medical staff out there, but also for the individuals, the people who've got it, because they don't even know how to look after themselves.
Right. So, that's right. That's absolutely true.
I hadn't thought of taking a comic book approach. So this is actually really interesting to read. Yeah.
I was trying to look for it just now, but I actually have some pictures that Rick took at Learning Technologies. That's Eric Kimori on the left there, because you were just talking about Eric.
Yeah. But Eric, to explain, Kevin, Eric hadn't even been on a train before he came to the UK.
Wow.
It's a different world that they live in.
Yeah, no, I'm very well aware of those cultures being such a, and it's interesting in this project, we take things for granted that we were born and raised with. And just some of the things that you wouldn't even put a focused thought towards. And let me ask you both a question, and this is one of the things we really struggled with. If I were to ask you to define in your own words, what does a safe learning space mean to you?
Somewhere where you can make mistakes.
That's a great one.
What was that, Lesley?
Somewhere where you can make mistakes and learn from them.
Yeah, that's our understanding of what a safe learning space is. Emotionally safe, that I can make mistakes and I can fail without, condemnation. The interesting thing about this particular culture is they don't understand metaphors. They really don't understand metaphorical understanding of things. So a safe learning space, and what you just defined, is metaphorically. In their world, in their mind, a safe learning space is to make sure chairs are put up underneath the table and there's no mop buckets out in the middle of the hallway. So in their mind, literally, they're thinking physical. Safe learning space is the space that I'm learning is physically safe. So how do you communicate to a wide audience, a low literacy audience, the definition of a safe learning space in the context of emotionally safe? So that was one of our main challenges, because we had to get past that before we can even get into the instructional content, because all of the instructional content was about going to the simulation and learning how to do these procedures and these techniques. And if you make a mistake, understand that, it's safe to make that mistake in this environment. So that's all the instructional stuff. So we can't even get to that until we define what a safe learning space is. Yeah. And we did it through the comic medium. So we were able to, but we had to back up a little bit. We had to build some characters. We had to do some character background development. We had to tell some stories about the characters. And then we had to get the audience to relate to these characters and see who they are in that environment. And then they relate to them. It's like, oh, that I know somebody that reminds me of myself. And then once we captured that emotion, then we can move into the instruction. And I think that was probably the most inspiring pieces of this project.
Yeah. But it's even other things like you're doing. So like when Eric came to visit me in the UK, one of the first things he said to me was, why have you got metal things on all your walls? And what he was talking about was radiators.
Oh, really?
He'd never seen a radiator before. So
that's the thing, and that's one of the other we have
drawings that you're doing.
Two subject matter experts, in India that were part of the design team that we worked almost daily with, and we had to exhaust every possible corner, every shadow, if you will. We had to exhaust looking for everything that we can think of in assessing what that culture is, what's that environment, what's the language, what are body language gestures that are offensive or not offensive, what are the clothing and the way they wear their clothing, whether in training, what does a patient typically look like, what's the typical dress of family members, what's a typical dress of patients, what's a typical dress of a nurse, even down to the bindi, which is between the eyebrows on Indian culture. There are different colors, there's jewels, and each one of those represent different things. They have different meanings behind them. So we spent a lot of discovery time figuring out that, and we had to embed ourselves essentially into that culture. So that, because when you're drawing and you're representing that culture in characters and in scenes and sort of things like that, you have to emotionally get them connected to that scene, because they will pick out the finest detail that's incorrect. And when they find something incorrect, they've lost that connection. So it was really imperative that we got everything absolutely correct.
I mean, I'm just thinking, because in a way that's true in pretty much all learning and e-learning, because you always have to be very careful, especially with graphic stuff, how things are going to be taken, because things could always be misinterpreted, or things could be found offensive, that sort of thing. But when you're dealing with a totally different culture and you're working in a totally visual medium where you have so much more, that there are all these details. I'm trying to imagine, and I'm just thinking it would be very.
It's kind of mind blowing in a lot of ways, because like you just said, even in traditional e-learning that we do here in the West, we'll write some copy, we'll write a script, and then how many times have we done a project and everybody, you have 4 or 5 different people reviewing the material, and you go out live, and then even after you publish, there's a typo, or there's an incorrect word, or there's something that's wrong still, because we get so comfortable with what things are. And then arguably the assessment of the learner audience oftentimes is taken for granted, that we know the audience, they're this and this, and we kind of put this mental persona that we know our audience. And sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong, because we don't fully invest in that. But when you go through a project like this, you have no choice. You have to do a thorough learner audience assessment.
That was one of the reasons that Eric came over to the UK. It wasn't just that people could hear firsthand from him what life was like in rural Kenya, but so that he could experience what life was like in a very well digitally advanced community, because he was absolutely amazed that you could control the television from your phone. He couldn't believe that you could see the internet and watch YouTube on the television. When we went on the underground, he said, but people are using their phones. I said, no, Eric, they're not using their phones to be on the internet. They're using their phones to play games and things. Oh, but then when we were on the train, we have got free Wi-Fi on our trains. And I connected him to the Wi-Fi, and he's going, but it's all free on a train? How can you have internet on a train? And how can it be free?
Well, tell us again about
That's right.
The story that you say sometimes about him sending that video and how much it cost.
Oh yeah, so he sent me a 45-second video, and he sent it via WhatsApp because that's the cheapest way for him to send it. And we covered his cost, and it was 45 seconds, and it would cost as much if you were going to stream it, if you were going to watch it locally. And it cost 1,000 Kenyan shillings, and 1,000 Kenyan shillings is £7. So what's that? Just over $7, $8.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Except that 1,000 Kenyan shillings is 20% of a rural worker's monthly wage.
Wow.
So it'd be the equivalent of somebody in the UK on working on the minimum wage, paying £240 to watch a 45-second video.
Wow.
It's beyond our comprehension.
No, you're right. We're very blessed and very fortunate to have access to this, and I think that motivates us either in my studio anyway, because of that, and we're able to communicate, and we're able to give them something that one they can emotionally connect to, but it gets them excited. They can relate to these characters, and they can jump in that story and pretend like they're inside that story. And then when we see in the real life simulations and they're acting out some of the stuff that they saw in the story, I mean how that's a win, right? Because that's the goal with us in e-learning and the e-learning and the learning and development industry. I mean, if you think about it, so you go see a movie, you go have a really great experience at the store, and you come home and tell your family, oh wow, I had a really great shopping experience, or have you seen that movie yet? You should really go see it. So anytime we have positive experiences and negative experiences, we tend to go share that with our peers and our family. When we just have sort of this normal experience, it's not worth sharing, whether it be good or bad.
Yeah.
So in a learning and development industry, when we're building e-learning, at least in my case, my goal is to create learning experiences that you share, that you go out and share. Hopefully it's not negative, obviously, but that you share a positive. Wow, my ultimate dream goal would be, oh my gosh, Harold would go and tell Lesley, he's like, Lesley, you have got to take this safety compliance course. It is the best safety course I've ever taken ever. I want to go take it again. I don't have to, but I want to. I mean, that's not going to happen ever, right? But if it's the attitude about that. So if you have the attitude going into that type of design focus and development focus, then you've put your best effort on the front end, and then you just you hope you hit a ball out of the ballpark in that case. So
the guy, this Eric, we put together a course on first aid. And it's a very practical first aid, and it's got 24 videos in it. And a teacher from the local school went along and did the course and kept going back. And she downloaded videos and bits and pieces. She then took it back to her school and transferred her learning to the 1,000 pupils that were in the school.
That is excellent.
That is how important. That is how important. So don't underestimate what you're doing and how far that it will spread, because that's
the hope. Yeah, right. That's the hope.
Yeah. Anyway, we're probably running out of time here, Harold. Now.
Yeah, we are, but this has been a really interesting conversation. It's just, very mind opening.
I can talk about this all afternoon.
Oh, it's fascinating, and I think that, and I will get in touch with you afterwards, because I think there's maybe, there's things that we can do, even even if we can't transfer it immediately, but some of your thoughts on it and your experiences would be really useful, particularly when we're going to be doing this diabetes project.
Yeah, right. And in my mind, I'm already just sort of hypothetically coming up with storylines, and because I've got there's family members that I know that suffer with that, type 1 and type 2.
Yeah, and it's one of the world's biggest killers, believe it or not.
Yeah,
it's huge.
Right.
Huge.
It is. Yeah. Well, Kevin, I think we're going to have you on again sometime, because I feel like,
we never got round to the Lego.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about Lego. I think there was this much to talk about, and we got through just that much. So
right. So I've got my...
Oh, here, let's...
Where's she at? Oh, there we go. Oh, there she is. I've got a pile of Lego right here I'm playing with. Well, I always keep a little small pile of Lego next to me to tinker with.
All right. Well, for all of those out there watching, if you got some Lego, get it and give it a little bit of time, play with it, and just settle things out.
If you're stressed out and you trying to get through a problem, and just real quickly, I know we're at the end here, but the theory of flow, we don't have time to really get into it, but the theory of flow suggests that when your hands are moving and you're working with your hands, or you're just focused on some task, that you're so focused that your brain sort of releases these endorphins, and you unlock things in your brain. So when we get into the flow, it's like this super focused brain. And what the theory of flow, along with the theory of play, which is backed up by constructionism, I can never say that one. But that's saying that we learn through assembly, or we learn through building, or we learn through making things. So if you take these theories and you kind of mash them together and you use Lego, then what it says is that if I take some Lego and I'm just playing, I'm not even thinking, I'm just putting stuff together, I'm not following instructions. I'm not building a model that you would get off the shelf. I just have a pile of loose, random Lego pieces, and I just start putting them together. And when you start doing that, in about 5-10 minutes, you're gonna start feeling things in your brain, and your brain's gonna start wandering. You're gonna start thinking about things, and if it's anything important that's on your mind, your brain will automatically. It's this weird thing that happens in your brain. It's like, wow, look at that. I'm clear. I'm focused. I can think better. It's hard to explain unless you go do it and you go through it. And then the Lego series play is a set of application techniques. It's actually a facilitated, guided, interactive exercises that you put people through. So the core process is I would ask what is referred to as a sufficiently unclear question, and then you would build a model, a metaphorical model you would answer that question based on that, using a metaphorical approach in building the model. And then we would reflect and share on that, and we'd see the perceptions back and forth, and then we just continue and add more to it and build more to it, and then essentially we start building a story. And then you start seeing the problem emerge in sort of this physical, visual, 3D way. It's fascinating. But we can come back and talk about that next time.
We'll have to have you back on again, Kevin.
That's our teaser for the next time with Kevin.
Right.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming on, Kevin and Lesley.
Oh, thank you guys, both. And Lesley, I hope to look forward to hearing from you soon.
Yeah. No, I shall email you. I will. Don't worry.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
All
Bye.
Right. Thank you for joining us here on eLearnChat. Bye, everyone.